Are you making one of the five biggest retirement mistakes? In this episode of Retire Stronger, we break down the most common pitfalls like missed tax planning windows, rising healthcare costs, and poor withdrawal strategies, and how to avoid them. Tune in to learn how a few smart moves today can help you retire stronger with clarity, confidence, and control. Hello and welcome to Retire Stronger, episode 21, the podcast that helps high-income professionals and successful retirees take control of their financial future. Each week, we're bringing you insights, strategies, and real-world guidance to help you retire smarter, more confidently, and with greater peace of mind. Hey, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Retire Stronger. I'm John Foard.
Hey, and I'm Bill Kearney. We are excited you're here today because this episode could be a game changer. We're tackling a topic that we've seen derail even the most diligent retirement savers. We're calling this the 5 biggest retirement mistakes, and we're going to give you some tips on how to avoid them.
Absolutely. We've worked with hundreds of clients over the years, and these 5 mistakes show up again and again. And the good news is they're all avoidable. Whether you're approaching retirement or already in it, understanding these pitfalls and taking steps to sidestep them can make a dramatic difference in your financial outcomes.
Yeah, so grab a cup of coffee or, like John, lace up those walking shoes and let's jump into the 5 biggest mistakes and, more importantly, how to make sure they don't happen to you.
Absolutely, Bill.
So the first one, John, let's jump into the first one here, which is we titled Waiting Too Long to Start Tax Planning. This is a big one, right? Let's start with, I guess, what we believe is probably the most overlooked and most expensive mistake in retirement planning, which is waiting too long to start thinking about taxes. I think a lot of people assume that tax planning is something you deal with later, like when your RMDs begin in your 70s, or that tax planning is what you do every year when you get your taxes done or completed by your accountant or CPA. But if you're waiting to do this and you're waiting into your 70s, by then it's often too late to do anything that is truly proactive. Your 50s and 60s are the golden window for strategic moves like Roth conversions and shifting assets to create more tax flexibility.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right, Bill. And if your entire nest egg is tied up in pre-tax accounts like IRAs and 401ks, then you're likely building up a tax time bomb. Once you hit age 73, required minimum distributions will kick in. Whether you need that income or not, you have to take that money out. And, when you do that, it can push you into a higher tax bracket. It could also potentially raise your Medicare premiums, and it could even cause your Social Security to be taxed more aggressively. Roth conversions are a powerful solution when done correctly and at the right time, especially in your lower income years or during the gap between retirement and RMD age. And I know we talk about Roth conversions a lot on this podcast, but it is a very powerful tool. You mentioned it a minute ago. It's a very powerful tool. And just like in our last episode, where we were talking about the set it and forget it trap, there's a theme we're trying to go on here is we're trying to help folks realize that there is a lot of proactive planning you can do now while you're still working, before you retire, or even shortly after you retire, between those years where you're required to start taking money. Be proactive, plan, right? That's kind of what we're getting at here. Would you agree, Bill?
I would. And it's so funny you brought up the last podcast, Set It and Forget It. It feels like we just recorded that. It's already been a week here that we're back doing this again. And of course, glad to be with you doing all of this. And I do want to give the disclosure we give in every episode, which is as we're going through this, remember that we're not giving anyone specific tax planning or investment advice. This is for entertainment purposes only. Please view it and listen to it that way. But going back to our topic here, the tax time bomb, not preparing in advance for your tax picture, I think this is where a lot of people are misled, John, by good intentions. Most of your CPAs, well-intentioned people, smart, intelligent people, they're focused on minimizing your taxes this current year, right? And oftentimes we'll call them historians. They're there to tell you year to year what has happened in your tax picture and potentially what you can do in the following year to make things better. But retirement planning, what we're talking about here, and we often call it tax optimization, it's a multi-decade challenge. It's an ongoing moving target. It's like a giant amoeba that we're trying to get our hands around, right? And it's well, there's a visual for you.
Yeah.
Or like the Jello in the bowl that you're trying to grab, and all in one scoop. It's impossible to do it all at one time. It's multi-decade type of strategy here, and the purpose is trying to strategically reduce your lifetime tax burden,
Hmm.
not just looking at what you are going to owe next year or this April or anything like that. And that's why having a long-term proactive tax plan is essential. And waiting too long will likely cost you dearly.
Yeah. I mean, the bottom line, right? Don't wait. If you're in your 50s or early 60s, now's the time to take action. Heck, if you're even in your 40s,
I was
now's
going
the
to
time
say
to
that.
take
Yeah.
action. I
Yep.
mean, it's never too soon to start planning appropriately. This is your opportunity to restructure your tax picture before the IRS forces your hand. And that's the bottom line.
You know,
So,
the visual here as it relates to this particular point, John, is it's like you're flying in an airplane. You know, when you're in your 40s, that's when you're about 200 miles away from the airport. When you're in your 50s, 60s, you're about 100 to 75 miles away from the airport, and you can start to see that runway out in front of you. When you get to your 70s, if you wait till then to do your tax planning, you are on top of the airport. And if you're not in the proper glide slope here, you're going to have to make a major course correction to get down to the runway, right? It's a
yep, and it
steep
could be too
angle
late.
of descent at that point.
Yep.
And and so, but when you're earlier on, we can make course corrections that are pretty minor to actually get you prepared for where you're going. So kind of wore out that analogy and that picture there, but that's really what this is like when we talk about the visual of doing things earlier and getting prepared earlier on here.
Oh, absolutely. A great analogy, really. I mean, well done. So I want to switch gears on us here.
Oh,
Let's talk
okay.
about mistake number two. And this is one that we know all too well. And it's actually a mistake that we're going to talk about today that we've actually done an entire podcast on. So go back and find the previous podcast that we've done on this topic alone by itself. But that is mistake number two, not understanding sequence of returns risk. So, that might sound technical, but it's incredibly important. And it's called sequence of return risk for a reason. This trips up a lot of otherwise savvy investors, and it's all about the timing of market returns. And let's pause here. I'm not suggesting you should try to time the market at all. That's not what we're getting at here. But what this mistake is referring to is timing of the market and how it behaves during your years of doing your financial planning and how your investments behave leading up to and when you start using the money you've saved for supplementing your retirement income. So it's not just what your average return is over 30 years that matters. It's the order in which those returns happen, again, especially when you're starting to take withdrawals.
That's exactly right, John. And I think in that earlier podcast that we did specifically on the topic of sequence of returns, I can't remember. I'll have to go back and look. I think we put something in the show notes related to this, a document
Yeah,
related to that.
I think we
If
did.
maybe if it's possible, we could put it in this one as well, since we're talking about that topic here. But let's say, for example, that you retire and you start pulling income from your accounts, and the market tanks in the first couple of years, and you're withdrawing money from a shrinking portfolio.
Hmm.
And really, what that does is just magnifies the losses. So even if the market recovers later, oftentimes the damage is already done because we've been taking withdrawals from a declining balance or a balance that has declined early in retirement. And that's why we recommend some type of bucket strategy. Oftentimes, the bucket strategy is different for every retiree or every different type of investor, but it divides your savings into short-term, mid-term, and long-term needs. Sometimes we'll call it now, soon, and later money.
Yep.
And
I was about to say
the
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 same thing.
money that's in those buckets is invested differently based on when we think or when we plan on needing to use those assets out into the future.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, now, soon, and later. Bucket one is your now money, your short-term cash. anywhere from 1 to 2 years worth of spending needs parked in something stable, something that can give you a very low predictable return, whether it's a money market fund, or a high yield savings account, or part of it's parked in some type of CD that's paying a good rate that you can get access to quickly if needed. That's what we're referring to here. Bucket two is for the next 5 to 7 years, more conservative income producing investments, but a little bit more, a little bit higher income and higher producing returns than something like a CD or a money market or high yield savings. And then you've got bucket three. That's your long-term growth bucket, designed to ride the market for 10 plus years or however many years you deem appropriate that you would want to see those dollars working for you. This approach helps you avoid having to sell stocks at a loss just to meet your income needs when the market's down, right?
Yeah, and also the bucket strategy is really visual for people. So if you're a visual learner and you like to see things kind of laid out in front of you from that standpoint, we actually have a bucket strategy where we'll put the assets in these different buckets. So you can then say, okay, oh, my IRA account is doing this, and Jane's IRA account is going to be over here in the near term bucket, and you can see where everything is laid out in front of you to determine which bucket we're going to use. So it's very, very good from a visual standpoint, actually, to do this as an exercise as well. And we did, as we mentioned earlier, we did an entire podcast on sequence of return. This is not a theoretical problem. It's real.
Oh
And
yeah.
frankly, we don't know who it's going to affect because we don't know when market losses are going to happen in relation to when you retire or right leading up to retirement. I can tell you that it caught some people back in 2008, right?
Mm.
I
Oh
can
yeah.
tell you it may have caught some people back in 2022. I can tell you it caught people back in the dot-com bubble, right? So there are periods where this is where the market's going to do its thing, and if that happens to be when you are retiring or close to retirement, this is when sequence of return could impact you, even after years of planning properly with your investments. So simple that a bad stretch at the beginning of retirement can derail even the strongest plan, even the most well thought and laid out plan. The bucket strategy that we're talking about here helps preserve your growth potential while shielding your long-term needs from that type of volatility.
Oh yeah. Well said.
All right, so let's talk about mistake number 3 here.
All right.
I would say underestimating healthcare and long-term care costs.
Oh yeah. Big one.
Another bowl of jello we're trying to pick up with our hands here, right? Very, very difficult to figure this out from a cost standpoint and what to expect. And do I need a long-term care plan or can I fund it myself? All those types of things. So we simply called it underestimating healthcare and long-term care costs.
Hmm.
It's easy to overlook this if you're healthy and active in retirement, right? But the reality is healthcare is one of the largest and fastest growing expenses for retirees. And it's really not just about your doctor's visits and prescriptions. There's a lot more to it than just that.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. And a lot of people just assume Medicare will cover everything, but it doesn't cover dental, vision, hearing, or long-term care. And long-term care, whether it's an in-home support, assisted living facility, or even a nursing home, can run as high as six figures per year. In fact, we ran some statistics on this, and it shows that about 70% of people over the age of 65 will need some form of long-term care during their lifetime. It's
Yeah,
a
and
staggering
it's
amount.
unbelievable. And we run into a lot of people in their 50s and 60s who are dealing with this with their parents right now. I was
Absolutely.
just in a meeting yesterday where one of the participants in the meeting, she was telling me that she's dealing with this with her father, and she's become an expert on long-term care. And so, you
Yeah,
have
you're
to think
forced you're
about,
forced into the frying pan, right? I mean, that you have to become very intimate and knowledgeable about the pitfalls of that section of that period of someone's life very quickly, when that happens to you personally, right?
yeah, and I mean, that you have a few different types of options here. You can look at traditional long-term care insurance like share care plans and things like that, but premiums can be high and benefits can be limited, and then sometimes people prefer like the hybrid type plans that combine life insurance with long-term care benefits, and some choose to self-insure, but that requires significant assets and a well-structured plan and discipline. I think the biggest thing in this area is having the right tools to educate. And I
Oh
can
yeah.
tell you from experience inside of the planning software that we use, we actually have a module specific to long-term care, which is really interesting because it will show you what the costs of care are in whatever state you plan on living in for retirement, what they are today, and then at what percentage rate they are rising per year, and then give you even a projection of, okay, if you're 80 and you need some type of care coverage, or you have to go into a facility, what is that going to look like on a monthly basis? And what is that going to do to the rest of your assets? You can actually stress test your portfolio based on the cost that you may incur in the future. It gives you kind of an idea of that, and then you can kind of come up with some strategies maybe to address it from there.
Yeah. And the bottom line again here is this is a risk you do not want to ignore. So planning for it now while you're healthy gives you more flexibility and more choices. Shocked. I know you're shocked, everyone, hearing me say that because we talk about, flexibility and choices a lot. And the sooner you plan for things, the more choices and options you're going to have. So, waiting until care is needed drastically narrows your options and, quite frankly, increases your costs. And so, I don't want to, let's don't beat that one too much into the ground. If you have questions about your possible long term care strategy, reach out to us, give us a call, or schedule some time to speak with us. We're happy to chat with you and take a look at how you're doing in that area. But let's move on to mistake number 4, which is not having a withdrawal strategy. And you know, not having a withdrawal strategy, or not at least not a clear one, or a well structured one, is something that a lot of people just do not think about. They just assume that once they've saved enough, the hard part is over. But the reality is retirement isn't just about accumulating money. It's about how you distribute it and distributing it wisely, right?
Exactly. I mean, without a proper withdrawal strategy, you might end up pulling from the wrong accounts at the wrong time, leading to higher taxes, Medicare surcharges, or even triggering extra tax on your Social Security benefits, as an example. And there are three levers that we help clients manage, which falls into which accounts to draw from first, how much to draw from each year, and then when to start Social Security. I think if you can cover those three basic areas, that is a withdrawal strategy that will likely be more successful than not.
Yeah, and it's not a static plan. You're going to want to review this on an annual basis, make sure that it's still the proper strategy for your situation. If things change, if you have life events that happen, these are all things you need to take into consideration. And you know, it again, this is where coordination really does matter. You don't want to pull from your Roth early if your traditional IRA withdrawals keep you in a low tax bracket. You also don't want to wait too long and then have massive required minimum distributions hit you all at once. Timing matters. Blending withdrawals across accounts, while managing tax brackets and income levels. This can all help extend your portfolio and lower your lifetime tax bill. And these are things that we work with our clients on very strategically to make sure that we're doing the best we can from a withdrawal strategy and from a tax strategy as well.
And I know that you often refer to this, John, as like choreography, right? You use those big college words sometimes with folks, but really it is. It's about coordinating, and it's the choreography behind what you do. It's not about what you're doing, but when you do it that matters here. And if you've noticed in all of these things that we've talked about so far, and generally speaking, as it relates to your finances, the decision you make in one area of your finances has impacts in other areas of your finances. It always does. And so
Yep,
you have
it's
to
like a
know
domino
what,
effect.
yeah, you have to know what those impacts are going to be before you make the decision to know if it's actually in your best interest.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
All right. So the last part here is failing to plan for longevity, right? Um,
Big one.
I think we did one on longevity risk as well. We've done a number of these podcasts, but if we haven't done one on longevity risk, John, write that down. That's a good one to do a podcast on in the future here. But I think failing to plan for longevity is a big one, and this one surprises people because living a long life is a good thing.
Hmm.
But financially, it's one of the biggest stress tests your retirement plan will ever face. And I know that Previously, a few years ago, one of the largest insurance carriers in North America, Allianz, did a study that found that by a 2-to-1 margin, people fear outliving their money more than they fear death. And I always thought that was pretty simple to explain, because if you die, it solves the problem of running out of your money. Um,
Yep.
right? But
I mean, yeah.
if you live too long and you outlive your money, you could have a really big problem.
hmm Yeah, I agree. Like, think about this. If you retire at 65, there's a very real chance that, one spouse will live into their 90s. That's 25 to 30 years of retirement to plan for. And many people just don't budget for that long. The risk of outliving your money is real, is very real, especially if you haven't accounted for inflation, rising healthcare costs, which is one of the previous mistakes we already talked about, or if you're not taking into consideration market downturns, right? Again, that's another mistake we talked about in this episode as well, which is sequence of return risks. When we're talking about how the markets perform and when and how, right? When you start taking distributions. So this is a very real problem that many people don't focus on. And Bill, we have a client that came to us and said, "Hey, I love the financial plan. It's great. This all makes sense. But why are you focusing on the plan showing me living to age 100?" And it was a very simple answer. And the answer is because what if you do? We have to plan for it. He's like, I'm probably not. Just plan for me to live to age 85. I'm probably not even going to make it that far. But the reality is, we're not doing our job properly if we're not planning for you to live a long life. And we have to be able to stress test the plan we're creating for you to account for this issue.
It's exactly right. And I'll tell you that, a generation or two before now's pre-retirees didn't have to worry about a 30 or 45-year
Mm-mm.
retirement. I mean, that's a whole other lifetime that you now have to get a paycheck from somewhere that doesn't come from work. If
Right.
if that's what the plan is for you, right? But previous generations didn't have to worry about things like this. I mean, previous generations didn't even have the term retirement. So this is a whole new ball game for a lot of people that maybe grew up in a household where these types of things weren't talked about because it wasn't something that anybody considered as even being a possibility. So that's where the strategic planning comes into play here. And that's why we focus on building plans that incorporate things like guaranteed income. Maybe that means an annuity or working with a pension plan that you have. And then adding to that some flexible withdrawal strategies that can adapt to life's changes.
hmm
And inflation protection here is key. And having a dynamic spending plan that allows you to just adjust without fear or panic when the unexpected happens. Those are all critical parts to the way the plan and things like that should be developed and constantly maintained.
Yeah. And so basically what we're saying here, folks, is that longevity risk amplifies every other risk. It amplifies market risk, healthcare costs, cognitive decline. You know, planning to 85 just isn't good enough anymore. Plan for 95, maybe even age 100. And that's what we do here. Your future self will thank you if we have an actual plan in place that helps dictate and comes up with a plan of action for the unknown, really, right? No one knows how long they're going to live. So yeah, so Bill, we've covered five very big mistakes that a lot of people make in retirement planning. Five of the ones we see probably more often than not. So let's very quickly recap what those five retirement mistakes are that we covered today. Number one, waiting too long to start tax planning. Number two, not understanding sequence of return risks. Number three, underestimating healthcare and long-term care costs. Number four, not having a proper withdrawal strategy. And then again, number five, failing to plan for longevity.
And this is not a comprehensive list, right? These are just the
Not at
five
all.
biggest ones that we see. There's a number of other things we could add to that in here. And I would just say, if any of those hit home for you, you're not alone. We hear
Mm-mm.
that from a lot of people. And these are common mistakes. And maybe they're just things that have been in the back of your head and you haven't really um, articulated them to anybody. But these are all things that are avoidable, or it can be addressed in some fashion for you. And that's why we offer a complimentary retirement readiness review, just to see where you are right now, get a snapshot of where you are right now and where you're going. And it'll help you stress test your plan. And maybe it's going to help you identify some potential blind spots. And the ultimate goal is to walk away with more clarity about your next steps. And the ultimate goal beyond that, John, is peace of mind, right? That's
Yep.
what the whole purpose of all of this is, for peace of mind.
Absolutely. And if you're looking for help in these areas, please visit us at crownadvisorgroup.com. That's Crown Advisor with an OR group.com. You can go there, schedule a time to meet with us. Just click on the complimentary assessment button and answer a few short questions and grab a time on our calendar. We're happy to chat with you about this. Or as always, feel free to give our office a call at 704-469-0200. 704-469-0200. And if you enjoyed today's episode, again, please share it with a friend or leave a review on Apple or Spotify podcast or Amazon Music podcast and follow us, like us. Even on YouTube, we're on YouTube as well. So follow us there also. We really appreciate you listening to us today.
Yeah, John, thanks for being here with us. And everyone, thanks for listening. We enjoyed it. We'll see you next time. And we'll be back with more strategies to help you retire stronger.
All right. Have a good day, folks.